Welcome back, everybody, to Nuts and Bolts Sports. I'm Raj, Jordan with me here. As always, we're talking the NBA restart here in the bubble, and we're basically here at the end of the seeding games. That went by so fast.
It was a
It feels
blur.
like we were just here, like gearing up for the first episode of this thing, and the seeding games are already done. I expected it to feel a little longer than that, but yeah, we're getting ready for the playoffs now. Playoffs kick off on Monday. We're going to get matchups from both conferences, but today here, because it's just a little bit more locked, we're going to be discussing the Eastern Conference playoff picture. So before we get into that, though, we do have a couple things that we want to discuss news-wise, and let's kind of just start with last night in general, the rounding out of the sort of seeding picture going into this weekend. And yeah, I mean, Dame, it's just like it's repetitive at this point. It's just like this has just become a Damian Lillard podcast, but rightfully so, going for 42 points. 3 games, 154 points, if I'm not mistaken, the first player to ever put up that kind of numbers. Incredible shooting on top of that. Free throw shooting was incredible. 3-point shooting was incredible. Put it literally all on the line. Nobody thought that Brooklyn, and I think Portland as well, did not think that Brooklyn was going to give them a run for their money here. But do you want to talk about them first, or do you want to get a little bit into the Suns first? What's your preference?
Yeah, we might as well stick with the hot hand that is Dame in Portland. We talked about last night, he was absolutely incredible. There was a point in like the third quarter and early fourth, especially the early fourth, where he felt Brooklyn might be able to pull away. And I remember I looked at you and some other people, and I was like, this is like make or break time for Dame here. And he came down and just nailed like 2 in a row from the logo.
He had 3 in a row. He had the one from the logo, and then he had the one sort of coming off from the top, and then he had then he had one on the wing as well.
Yeah, he was nuts, and that's it's what the great players do, and he's on some kind of tear. I can't imagine the hoop has to look just massive to him right now. It's got to look like an ocean.
That half court one, especially, because he just like pulled up, and the funniest thing about that was his comments in the post game interview, where he was like, he basically threw his teammates under the bus a little bit, because he was like, they're doubling me, and I got to get to one of my teammates, and I got to make the right play, but like the right play there was just to shoot it before the double team came, and he just pulled up from however far it was, and just drained it. I mean, like, this has got to be one of, if not the hottest streak that we've ever seen a player in terms of scoring, at least. I know Kobe did it a few times sort of in the mid 2000s and whatnot. LeBron's had a couple stretches where he dropped a couple 50-game points or 50-point games close to each other, but I don't remember the last time that like, a player had like NBA Twitter and fans, general fans and like hardcore fans alike, this up in arms and going crazy about how incredible he's playing.
And I think like the difference between like Dame's stretch here, because like we kind of put that in the notes, like Kobe had the 4 50-plus point games in 07, which was probably the last like truly amazing stretch that we had from any player scoring wise. And Dame's almost matched that. He's got 51.3 in the last 3 games combined. So we'll see what he does here in this next playing game. But I think the crazy part is like when I looked at the numbers between Kobe's 4 games and then Dame's 3, is like Kobe was taking maybe like 7, 8 threes a game and making them at a good clip because he was hot. But Dame is literally like 14 threes a game. Like just the pure volume of the shots, I think it's more exciting. Like, Kobe and those guys played in the post, more, mid-range space back then. Now it's obviously all about the 3 ball. And for him, it's just like beyond 3. I mean, it really should be 4 points. If he's going to take it from that far, if your feet are going to be touching a logo of a court, like you really should get something extra.
Yeah.
You have to give credit to Brooklyn, though. I mean, I kind of thought they were just going to lay down. They were already set in the playoffs. So I kind of figured, why would they, worry too much about
anything? They were not playing for anything at all there.
But especially Karis LeVert. I mean, the guys had a good game. Jared Allen was a monster on the boards. And Howard Johnson had a weird stretch where I was like, this is a Howard Johnson game. But Karis LeVert was phenomenal as well. And he kind of gets overshadowed because they, A, didn't win, and B, because of Dame. But he controlled that game just as much on Brooklyn's offensive end. Jumpers, fadeaways, going to the rack when his jumper wasn't falling. I mean, I thought the game winner that he took, I thought it was in. I was watching him, and I thought, step back, he's going to have it. And she let it go, and I was like, oh, they're going to kill Portland with a step back. And he just missed. So, I mean, obviously Brooklyn's not going to do anything this year, but props to them for still playing hard and making that a fun experience for everybody last night.
Yeah, I agree. That shot did look so good when he came off, and it was like it felt like a storybook sort of ending. And us being NBA fans, as well as I do that we never get what we want out of this thing. We all wanted Portland in that playing game, and we were like, oh, Phoenix could be done here. Like, what are we actually going to get here? And when that shot went up, I was like, I'm about to be real disappointed. Luckily, it didn't go in, but yeah, I agree with what you said in that Brooklyn put up a hell of a fight and they deserve the utmost credit. Let's pour one out for Phoenix now. 8-0 in the bubble. I think the greatest enemy, and I hate saying this because I love the team, but the greatest enemy of basketball fans right now is the Memphis Grizzlies because they went and demolished the Bucks, even though Giannis was not playing. Middleton played, Bledsoe played, and they still went out there and smashed them. And that was something that nobody was expecting with Jaren Jackson being out. But it is what it is. You got to deal with the consequences. And Grizzlies, the Grizzlies are still a fun team to watch despite Jackson not being there.
Yeah, they are, and it'll be a fun matchup between Ja versus Dame to kind of see. You have this elder. Dame really is almost like an elder statesman at this point. He's been in the league so long, and Ja's the rookie. He's supposed to be the next big thing. But yeah, I mean, you got to give Phoenix credit. I mean, everybody had them pretty much being done right away and probably resting guys. I know Bleacher Report's thing was talking about there's going to be one team that's going to go 0-8 in the bubble, and the photo they used was of Devin Booker in Phoenix. So everyone was writing them off, and to their credit, they came out and there really weren't any fluke wins. It wasn't like anybody laid down for them. They beat everybody that they played, obviously, and they weren't sitting guy when they beat the Clippers. I mean, he hit that shot over Paul George and Kawhi.
They beat Dallas yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they literally came out and played just a great brand of basketball. Ayton was good. Booker was obviously phenomenal. And like we talked about, a couple times now, they got so many good contributions. I don't know if you saw the Monty Williams post game where he said, he was just so proud of them. He's like, it doesn't even matter what happens. You earn the respect of the peers in the league. And I think that's very true. I think a lot of teams are kind of put on notice. I'm not saying that Portland or Phoenix is going to come out and be some sort of title contender next year, but I think they took a major step in the right direction in this bubble. Although the joke has to be made, can they just play all their games in Orlando, or do they have to go back to Phoenix?
Yeah, right.
You got to give them credit for doing that. It does. It sucks that they go 8-0. You literally did your job in the bubble. But we'll just have to see what they do next year. And now we move on to Portland and Memphis for the playing game. Do you want to explain how that works so everyone kind of knows? Because I feel like people are confused.
Yeah. So what the play-in game is for people that are not entirely aware from the league's initial announcement and whatnot is that it was originally stated that when the 8 and 9 seed, when there was 4 games max separating the two teams, there was going to be a play-in game where the 8 and the 9 seed would fight for that final spot. A lot of it had to do with because teams like San Antonio had not played as many games as some of the other teams. So it kind of balanced out that structure in both of the bottom of the conferences. Gave the Wizards a shot as well. It was basically the justification for bringing those teams that were outside the playoff picture back in because it made that thing more attainable. Although some of these teams ended up catching up so quickly to that 8 seed that it didn't make that big of a difference. But yeah, so what this is going to look like now is on Saturday. So tomorrow, actually, they're going to play. Portland is going to play against Memphis, and they're going to have go at it basically. And if Portland wins that game, then it's done. Portland is the 8 seed, set in stone. If Memphis wins, then there's going to be a second game on Sunday. And if that second game happens on Sunday and Memphis wins that one, then Memphis has won 2 games and they're in. But if Portland wins the 1, then they're in. So basically what I'm trying to say is the 8 seed, who is Portland right now, only has to win 1 game. Memphis, who is the 9 seed, has to win 2 games to get into the playoff picture. But it does give both teams a fighting chance, and that's kind of what Phoenix was fighting for there as well.
And it's not a best of 3, just because I feel like a lot of people, if Memphis wins 1 and Portland wins the second, people are going to be like, wait, where's the third game?
That was confusing. We
don't have time for that. We got to get the playoffs rolling.
Yeah. But it does, this is something that we were talking about before we got recording here. It does sort of tighten the window for these teams that are playing in the play-in game. If Dame loses that first game or if Portland, I'm just calling him Dame now because he's basically carrying that. Yeah. But if Portland does lose that first game on Saturday and then they win the second one on Sunday, they only have a day off before they have to go into the playoffs against the Lakers, the number 1 team in the Western Conference. So whichever team comes out of this thing, Portland already looks exhausted as is after yesterday. Nurk and Dame were both out of running on complete empty. It was ridiculous. But that does paint an interesting picture as to what's going to happen. We're not going to really do a proper preview of that matchup the way we are for some of these other matchups because it is just 1 to 2 games. But do you think that Memphis can maybe take a game off Portland, or do you think it's just going to be 1 and done?
There's definitely a shot. I mean, they have the one thing that Memphis has going is that they have a guy in Valanciunas who can kind of match up with Nurkic and at least try to contain him on the boards. And then you have Ja, who's obviously been very, very good all year. The only issue that I see is obviously the Memphis not having Jaren Jackson Jr., which is a huge blow. And the problem is they're not significantly better defensively than Portland is. We saw kind of Portland last night. They can't really guard anybody, for as fun as they are. And Memphis would need to be like a whole league above them defensively to have a chance to contain Dame and CJ and some of those guys. And I just don't think that they have it defensively. If I had to guess, I would probably say Portland's going to take it in just one game. But I think it'll be closer than people realize. I think Memphis, they're hungry. You want to get Ja and those guys to the playoffs, so they're going to give them everything they can handle. It's going to be probably not quite as close as last night's game, but within like 4 to 6 points.
Yeah, it'll be a couple possessions. I tend to agree with what you're saying because I don't think we can count out Memphis because they still, they are where they are because of what they did in the regular season. And if Jaren Jackson Jr. is not there, it is a blow to that team. But that you can't completely discount them because of how good Ja has been. Obviously, going to be Rookie of the Year and whatnot. So you have to give them a little bit of credit there. Do we think we're going to see Dame go for another 40 to 50 plus or? I think yes. I'm gonna put my money on 50 at least because I think. I just think he's just so hungry for it. And like, he knows that was like the first hump, but he's still got one other step to go. And Dame is not the kind of guy that's going to let up on situations. He's going to go after it. He's going to go after it. And I think I would put my money on seeing a potential other 50-point game from him.
For sure. No, I agree completely.
Yeah. Another quick news thing before we get into official announcements. I don't really have much to say about this. I don't think you do either, but the Bulls did fire Jim Boylan as head coach. Just continuing to show that the Bulls don't really quite know what they're doing there. Have not really had a consistent coach. And since Tom Thibodeau was the last guy that really stayed there for a long time. And even then, that was a bit of a disastrous falling out in Chicago. So, not the best situation there. Any thoughts, anybody you think on the coaching free agent market that they could pick up? Could we have seen a Thibodeau return if he didn't sign that deal that he just signed?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, he obviously had success there. And yeah, it's like we kind of talked about it. There's not a whole lot that needs to be said, but Chicago, even with their success in the early 2010s with Rose and those guys, that they kind of got lucky drafting Rose and having him blossom into a superstar and some of those other pieces. Other than that, they've been pretty dysfunctional since MJ retired. It's from the top of the organization to Paxson and those guys in the GM role. So there's not a whole lot of light on the horizon. They have some fun pieces. Levine's obviously fun to watch. Wendell Carter Jr. is good, and Chris Dunn, for those of you like defense, is really exceptional as well. But they just don't have a lot yet. We'll see who they draft. I mean, maybe they get like LaMelo or something like that, or Cole Anthony, and then they'll be a little bit improved. But yeah, not much else to say on it.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and get into the matchups then. So what we're basically going to do here is, like I said, we're going to be previewing the Eastern Conference playoff picture today. Monday's episode will be the Western Conference picture. I know we'll have a couple games under our belt by that point, but it's not a problem because we will have the seeding or the play-in games set and done. But yeah, we're just going to kind of discuss this series by series and predict who we think are going to win. What are the sort of keys? What players should we be looking out for? Are there any situations that are key to each of these matchups? So let's just go ahead and start with the 1-8. Milwaukee versus Orlando here. And, this is another thing that we don't really need to spend too much time on. Not that Orlando really had much of a chance of doing anything in this series, as bad as I feel saying that, because they made the playoffs 2 years in a row, surprisingly, and people shouldn't they took that first game off Toronto last year too, didn't they?
They did.
I think they lost the 4 straight afterwards.
The DJ Augustine game, yeah.
That's right. So they could surprise people here, but we just found out that Mo Bamba, unfortunately, is still. I guess he's still dealing with some COVID related things that I guess he was affected by it prior to the bubble, and I guess he's still dealing with that. I know he opened up about it quite a bit while he was in the bubble as well, talking about the experience that he had dealing with it. So I think that he's going to be done here completely. So they're basically just relying on Vooch at this point, and it's just like it. Is Milwaukee going to be, I guess the biggest thing that we need to pay attention to here is Milwaukee going to be able to continue at the clip that they have been, the historic clip of putting up historic offensive and defensive numbers while playing their stars somewhere between 30 and 35 minutes. That's, I think, the biggest sort of thing that we need to pay attention to here.
Yeah, definitely. And I can't see a world where that doesn't happen. I would say, as I'm sure you'd agree with, that they're going to sweep. We wrote in the notes, I said Buxton foe, which is the classic term. But yeah, I mean, they're just playing at a high level. Giannis, everybody's pretty much healthy. Bledsoe's back. They have, like you said, historic numbers on offense and defense. And the Magic they just don't quite have enough. If you watch them like in regular games, they're actually not bad to watch. They play very hard. Steve Clifford does a great job of like limiting. He rebound. They have their team always rebounds the ball well. They don't turn the ball over a ton. Like he does a lot of fundamental work, which makes them tougher outs than you would think. Hence why they were probably able to take a game off of Toronto last year. I just don't think they quite have enough this year, unless like Vucevic or Aaron Gordon plays like out of their mind for a game and goes off for like 35 or 40.
Or even a Terrence Ross who's dropped 50 before in a game could sort of be one of these 50 guys that could light up a team like the Bucks. I don't see it happening, but the circumstances are like the proof is there. He's done it before. So
yeah, but then like even if they do that and they get it into a high scoring affair, like who is going to stop Giannis? Who's going to stop Middleton? Middleton, as I've talked about before, is an exceptionally good shooter in the regular season, and actually he's one of the few guys who gets better in the postseason. So that we know that this is going to end. Milwaukee should probably sweep them. Which I guess the only key then will just be like how the 4 or 5 matchup goes, which we'll get to. Will they be super fresh? Will that game go 6 or 7 games, and then Milwaukee's kind of got to shake off some rust? That'll be the only kind of interesting part, but we'll touch on that when we get to that matchup.
Sure. So we both have Milwaukee sweeping in this series as our sort of predictions. Let's get into number 2, the Toronto Raptors versus number 7, the Brooklyn Nets, who did like we've just said, they surprised a lot of people last night in that matchup against Portland. What are you kind of looking at in this series?
Well, I feel like this hasn't been said enough, but it's not just Brooklyn versus the Raptors. This is the defending champion Raptors. I feel like they've had the most underrated or underappreciated like title defense just because of like everything that happened midway through the year. Stoppage. But they are playing absolutely their best basketball right now. They lose Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green after last year, and they finished with the best winning percentage in team history. And they shredded the Lakers and I think a couple other teams in the bubble as well. So they're playing very well. In terms of the keys, LeVert's going to be the guy for Brooklyn because we saw it last night. My only fear is that Toronto was watching that whole game being like, okay, we can work on this, defending him this way here and getting him to, push out of his spots there. They just have such a good team defense. They have so many long athletes from, even Kyle Lowry at a point guard, like he's a good defender. And then you go to Anunoby, you have Marc Gasol, you have Ibaka, Siakam. This is bodies after bodies that they can throw at these guys. So I don't think you're going to see another like Tyler Johnson game, which is going to leave Brooklyn in a lot of trouble. I don't see this being, too big of an issue for Toronto. I know they were stunned last year when they lost the first game to the Magic, but I personally also have the Raptors in foul.
Yeah, I echo everything that you've said here. The one thing that I sort of, because we were kind of collaborating on what we thought was going to be the keys to the things to look out for, and the one thing that I added to the sort of bullet list that we have here is there any risk of Toronto staying healthy? Because we know Kyle Lowry has had some issues, and he's obviously a very key piece to that team. I know Nick Nurse has proven to us that he can take a team that is not necessarily, star-studded team and take them to victory this season. He's proven that to us. But, is there any sort of fear that Toronto could maybe slow down? Because I always have that fear. And I have the Raptors in 5, just because I think that Karis LeVert, after the showing that he had last night, might be coming into this game with a little bit of swagger, a little bit of confidence, or into this series rather. And I think that he could, he's the kind of player more than anybody on the Magic that we were just talking about that can actually steal a game in a sort of underdog matchup like this. And I just expect it to happen because Toronto, they are the defending champions, but that path for them to the championship was not easy last year. They lost a lot of games. They lost to the Magic. They lost a few to the Bucks. Philly took them to 7. This team is going to win games in a 7-game series, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to sweep. They don't do it often. I don't remember the last time that they swept. So,
and most teams don't. It's tough to sweep. It's a lot tougher than I think we all think it is. Everyone always picks like, here's a sweep. Like the only guy who really consistently sweeps is honestly LeBron.
Yeah. And the other thing about that is they are playing the Brooklyn Nets. Besides Phoenix, Brooklyn might have been the biggest surprise in the bubble because they had a lot of good wins, and in the losses, they still played pretty well in most of those matchups. So I just expect them to steal one game just because, like you just said, it's not easy to sweep. And I think that Karis LeVert is a major threat. And a guy like Jared Allen is another good piece there in the sort of middle that can really, a guy like Gasol who's old now and can't really keep up with the guy like Jared Allen in the middle athletically. I think that could cause some issues for Toronto. I don't think it's going to be a major problem for them. Like I said, it's one game max, but I'd say 5 here.
So what you're saying is when Toronto goes up 3-0, you were both going to be watching Game 4 with like very serious intensity, seeing who's going to be right. You're rooting hard for Brooklyn in Game 4.
Are you going to be able to steal those bragging rights from me? Because the bet is still standing from a couple of days ago, the Devin Booker 45-point game that never happened. So we'll see if that does end up changing. Let's get into maybe the most interesting of this entire playoff picture. I know Ashmir's talking about the Heat in the comments, and that's another very interesting matchup actually. But first, number 3 Boston Celtics versus number 6 Philadelphia 76ers. You put in the notes here, these teams do not like each other, and then I added to that, are we going to get our first bubble brawl? I would not be surprised if that ends up happening. I've been itching for a fight to happen, and it hasn't happened yet. And people hate it when I say that, but I don't care because I want to see these two teams go at each other. They hate each other, and I can't wait for there to be some real tension here in this series.
Yeah, and it's a shame that Simmons seems like he's pretty much out. He's not gonna be able to play in the series.
Yeah, no, he's not playing in this series unless it goes to 7. Then maybe you come back in that last game. But I don't think he's playing.
Yeah, and especially with the injury, he's supposed to be your centerpiece, so they don't think they're going to risk bringing him back out of the blue, which kind of stinks because he can definitely make a big impact in a series like this with his size and passing ability. But yeah, like we said, these are two teams that don't necessarily love each other. They obviously, they met in 2018. The Celtics won that in 5, but it was a very tough 5. Like it wasn't, I think Horford had a game-winning shot, and somebody else hit one late too. It wasn't one of those series that it was a blowout. And there was a lot of physicality in that series. Especially when you have guys like Embiid and Marcus Smart, and Mike Scott for the Sixers as well. Like those guys tend to be like they're like spark plugs, and if you put them in the wrong spot, things get a little testy. If only we had Marcus Morris, he'd probably be the other lock for a brawl as well. Yeah. But in terms of like the actual basketball aspect of it. It's two different styles. You have Boston, who's a lot of great wings, a lot of free flowing, good passing, pretty good from the outside shooting, and obviously they have a star in Tatum who can kind of take over a game. Whereas Philly is relying, pretty much heavily on Embiid, especially in the post. That's where they're gonna have the mismatch, is because you have Daniel Tice, who's not bad, but he's not really worthy of holding down Embiid. So the Sixers are really gonna have to make them pay inside and really get the ball in deep. Embiid does this thing where he tries to catch the ball from 20 feet out, work his way in. And I don't understand it. Like, you're 7 foot, you have such a physical gift. If they can get him touches, 4 to 6, 5 to 7 feet away from the hoop, that's a dribble move or an up and under. And all of a sudden that's pretty much an automatic 2 points.
Yeah.
And then the other part is obviously can Philly capitalize if Boston does start to throw doubles? That we know Philly has marked troubles with their 3-point shooting. Can their guys like Tobias Harris, Josh Richardson, Shake Milton, even Thibault to an extent, can they knock down the open shots? Because if you don't knock down any open ones, I don't see them knocking down contested ones, which is going to put them in a bind. I don't know if you have like anything specific for Boston, but that's just kind of what I see for Philly.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with Philly, and what you hit on, sort of, especially with the shooting. That's the thing that they've struggled with quite a bit this season, despite the talent that they have at those positions. And losing JJ Redick was actually a major blow for that team, and we're kind of seeing that now because the spacing and the sort of their ability to kick it out and shoot the ball it's not been there at all this season, despite having guys like Thibault and like Harris who can hit those shots. It just hasn't been consistent enough for Philly, and that shows in their record. Them being the 6th seed is not where any of us expected that team to be. And with Simmons, yeah, I did too. Exactly. So that's a problem sort of as is. 1 to 6 is a major drop, obviously, but then you're going up against Boston, who is just incredible on the defensive end, just as good on the offensive end. This is major problems for Philadelphia, with Simmons not being there, their best defensive player not being there, possibly their best offensive player not being there. Even though he can't shoot the ball, he still creates so many open shots for his teammates. Right. This is really, really bad for Philadelphia. This, I think, is going to be the end of this era of the Philadelphia 76ers. I have them going on 5. I have Boston winning this in 5 games.
I tinker between 5 and 6. I'm going to give, and I think this is probably a mistake, I'm going to give Philly the benefit of the doubt and say it's Boston in 6. Okay. Just because if Embiid can be healthy and get it going, I mean, if he's fully capable of putting up back-to-back like 35 and 20 games. Like, I don't see a world where that can't happen. Will it? I don't know. It depends on the effort and kind of the attitude of everybody. And you mentioned like end of an era. I think, we don't know what they're going to do with Embiid and Simmons in the offseason. I do think Brett Brown is pretty much coaching for his job. They
Yeah.
lose the series, even though you could say without Simmons it's not necessarily his fault. I still think at this point Elton Brand's probably going to be looking to make a move if they do get bounced in the round one.
The other thing I wanted to touch on actually with Boston, I gave their defense credit. I gave a little shout out to their offense, but Tatum he's a star. He is so good, and we talked about him I think on the first episode of this entire thing, maybe the second one of this entire thing. After it was the second one because he had that bad game sort of to open off the bubble where he was like 2 of 18 or whatever. Then he bounced back immediately, and on top of him being as good as he is at his age, he's very confident and very consistent for a player as young as him to be as good as he is on both sides of the floor and to be as consistent as he is. And he's shown it in the postseason. In his rookie season, he showed us in the postseason against LeBron James. Like this is going to be this is going to be easy peasy for him. I just don't have a lot of trust in Philly. I think Philly is good enough with an Embiid to maybe take one game, but I just cannot see this team winning 2 games or possibly even 3, and definitely not the series because of just what they've shown us this entire season. Let's go ahead and get into the final matchup here.
The overall juiciest one, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, so close in record. Are they still tied in record? I should have checked that before I got on here, but they're so close in record. 4-5 matchup. They just face each other. I think they face each other again tonight, or did they play yesterday? Something.
They just finished up. Indiana won. Yeah. So Indy finishes a game ahead of them. So technically, Indy is the 4th seed.
4, yeah.
5.
Okay, so then
matters nothing for home court. But
but I think I think this is going to be a little bit of an echo from what we talked about a few days ago. Is this Jimmy versus TJ? Because that game that we got a few days ago was quite a disappointment in terms of what we were expecting from it. You and I were hyping it up. I think me especially. I was way over hyping it, and those two guys. Jimmy showed up. But neither of them put up crazy numbers. There was not a lot of flashy. There was no fighting. There was not really a whole lot to it. It was just Jimmy going out there, locking up TJ, not letting TJ get the best of him, and getting the easy win for Miami. Is that what we're going to see carry into this series?
I do think Miami's going to come out on top. I guess I'll just lead with that. I have them in 6. But Indy's, they're tough. They play very well. I wish they had Sabonis. That's obviously been a huge miss for them. But they've also had, pretty much the whole bubble to adjust without him. So it's not like they're losing him here at the last second. It really just, Indy is their kind of only shot is, can Oladipo muster up a couple of those classic games from before his hamstring injury or his quad injury. Can Miles Turner kind of negate Bam Adebayo a little bit, because Turner is a good athlete in his own right and should be able to, alter some of his shots in the paint. He's a pretty good rim protector. And then can he he's an okay 3-point shooter. Can he bring Adebayo out of the paint with that threat of the 3-point shot, which will open up his teammates then for drives to the lane? And then on offense, Indy's kind of got to take advantage of Miami has like 2 sets of players, the really good defenders and then not so good defenders, but we love them because they play offense well. Yeah. That's like the Duncan Robinsons, the Tyler Heroes, even Dragic to an extent. Like those guys are really fun to watch, but if like 2 or 3 of them are on the court at once, it does leave Miami's defense vulnerable, which is probably why they'll move to that zone here and there. Sure. But if Indy can do a good job of attacking that, then they can, maybe win a couple games here and make it interesting. Obviously, TJ Warren started out very hot. He's cooled off a little bit here at the end, so we'll see how much he can, maintain in these matchups, especially going up. But Butler's going to be guarding him probably a lot. Not only somebody he doesn't like, but Butler's a very, very good defender as well. So it's going to be an uphill battle. But there are routes where Indiana makes this a very competitive series.
I had Miami winning this one in 5 as well. So my outlook on the Eastern Conference.
You're just moving it along.
Yeah, I have a very grim outlook on the first round of this, and it comes down actually to the thing that you mentioned up top. The Sabonis being out for Indiana was such a major blow. Oladipo is playing solid in sort of limited time and limited touches. He's been pretty good, I think, but he's definitely not the player that he was before the injury yet. I think he'll get there by next season once he's got a little bit more time, because he doesn't look like bad by any means. It just looks like the rust is still kind of there. But Sabonis being out is such a key, because that matchup, the center matchup between, or even the power forward matchup, going up against Bam Adebayo is not an easy ask for anybody. Miles Turner is still very young. And I think that his potential is like all the way up here. I think he has sky high potential, but he has not quite shown us that he has reached even close to the potential that he has. And I think that both on the offensive and defensive end, I just think what's most scary to me is that Bam is such a good defender and Sabonis is such a good playmaker on top of being a good scorer.
Right.
Miles Turner is a solid scorer, but is not close to the playmaker that Domantas Sabonis is.
Right. 100%.
And I just think that he's going to have trouble obviously on the defensive end trying to contain Bam, because Bam is very, very difficult to contain near the basket and actually even about 15 to 20 feet outside the basket, because he can play make as well.
Yep.
Bam and Sabonis are actually pretty similar players when you kind of break things down, at least on the offensive end. But I think that matchup is so key in this matchup between Miami and Indiana. I also just don't think that hot streaks like TJ Warren's will continue into the playoffs the way Dame's maybe will, but TJ Warren, he had his fun. He had his fun here.
Dame is established. Like, we know that Dame could do this. TJ Warren was like a crazy surprise, if we're being honest. Probably not on my top list of guys that do it.
Jimmy shut him down last time. Jimmy just went out there and he's like, I know what this guy does and I can take care of him and I know it's easy. And I like you said, the game just ended right now, so I haven't looked at the final numbers there and I don't even know if
either guys played.
Yeah, so exactly. But like Jimmy's going to get the best of him, because Miami was winning those games earlier on in the season as well when Sabonis was playing, and that sort of thing that instigated the Miami or the TJ Warren versus Jimmy drama. Like, Miami was handling Indiana in that game too, so I don't have a lot of faith in Indy.
And plus, too, I think if it even came down to like a game 6 or a game 7, if something crazy happened, if Indy got hot, Miami also has the experience factor. You have Jimmy Butler, who's been to some conference finals. He's battled LeBron how many times? You have Dragic, who has been in the playoffs a bunch. He made it to the Western Conference Finals 2010 with the Suns. And then obviously you have Spoelstra as the coach, who has been in he went to 4 straight finals and has a ton of experience in big games. So if it comes down to any kind of like slim margin where it's like who's going to be kind of more mentally prepared for a big moment, Miami has that edge as well. So I think we're definitely, even though we disagree in the games and like I guess how close they're going to be, we can definitely agree Miami's got a big edge in that department and they should be moving on.
I will say this much: if Indiana was healthy, if Sabonis and Oladipo were both there and sort of playing at their capacity that we saw from them,
different series.
I think Indiana would take this pretty handedly. I think this would maybe be a 6-game series in Indiana's favor, but they just have bad luck here. I think that because Sabonis, I think, was such a key in his growth in this season, in particular, and making the All-Star team and whatnot. I just think that when you have a guy that is that skilled with guys like Oladipo playing the wings, and I know Miami and actually Indiana are pretty similar in the Bam and Sabonis, Jimmy and Oladipo aren't that far off when you kind of compare them, at least number-wise. Yeah, so like it is pretty good matchup, but I think Indiana, because I think Nate Duncan is Nate McMillan is Nate McMillan has shown. Also, he just got the extension as well. I think it's only a 1 year or whatever, but he's coming to. He definitely has, especially here in Indiana. I know he had some good years in Portland and whatnot, but then he kind of fell off the radar. Wasn't really coaching a lot, and has sort of found his groove here again with Indiana. I think Indiana would have had this series if they were healthy, because they're so close to Miami as is, even though they're not healthy. But I think Miami's got this one pretty easy because of the injuries.
Well, and because I know Ashmer's watching this right now, and that kind of the same thing goes for the Warriors. If they had Steph Curry and Klay healthy, maybe they would have won more than like 14 games. But instead, she's stuck there on the sidelines watching. We'll cover her favorite team Monday.
If LeBron hadn't left for LA, Cleveland would probably still be in the 5 seed because they don't know what they're doing there in Cleveland, so it doesn't really matter for us. But
and if I had wheels, I'd be a wagon.
But that'll bring us to a close for this discussion. Did you have any other closing thoughts? Anything else that you want to touch on before we get out of here?
Kendall Jenner, stay out of the bubble. I had to get one in there.
It had to happen just for the numbers. But yeah, that'll bring us to a close for this discussion. We'll come back here on Monday. We'll recap some of the play-in games. We'll have a couple playoff games under our belt. Like I said, we'll probably go live a little bit later on Monday, so we'll have seen at least 2, if not 3 full games by that point. So we'll be able to discuss that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to discussing the Western Conference play picture. That's a lot more interesting than this one. Yes, I'll tell you that much.
We are going to have some lengthy. There's going to be some tough series and just so much talent. So that's going to be probably even longer than this one probably. So I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, thanks for joining us. You can find our social medias down there. Please be sure to follow Nuts and Bolts Sports on our website as well as on all social media, and we'll be back